24/7. I'm so productive.
Really? This?
No, not at all.
It's not very relaxing, I don't think.
This is what happens when you lose a penny. Can you imagine? Just like I can just see a Charlie Chaplin skit right now.
Does anybody play an instrument? I know some people were saying in the introductions that they play instruments. Hello, everyone.
Who plays an instrument? Feel free to unmute and say something. Feedback.
Okay.
Maybe the music is too loud.
Yeah, who does play an instrument? We could have our own band.
No one played. I played clarinet when I was in school.
I played flute very badly. Very,
Ooh.
very badly. I feel.
You wish you played a different instrument, like if you went back, or like.
Yes, because all the girls played flute or clarinet, and I wish that I had played a brass instrument like the trumpet, something loud.
So we can start a really, really bad band.
Oh, that really bad bands are the best kinds.
Did you know that every band starts out as a really bad band? It's the only way to start. Unless you're like I don't know, a fork of another band or something, maybe, or you come together with some soloists.
Yeah. Well, we have 34. We'll give everyone one more minute. How was your weekend? Anyone do anything exciting?
Feel free to unmute. There's not that many people, so we can definitely.
You should. Where you can unmute and speak. We're not.
We won't bite.
I brought a bunch of my clothes from my wardrobe to a thrift store to just donate, just to be more of a minimalist in my own like wardrobe.
Yes. Awesome. I love doing that. I do that like every 3 months, and I don't feel like I buy that much stuff, but every time I do it, I'm like, holy crap. Stuff just accumulates. Like I feel like I just.
So now what are you down to? Do you have a uniform?
No, I mean, I have like 5 outfits. I have 2 pants that I alternate between. So I'm that, like that, you know, the Barack Obama thing. He like wears 2 suits, like it's like blue or gray, I think. So I'm that on pants, at least.
And what about you, Julie? What are you down to now that you've donated all of your stuff?
I'm down to enough stuff that will fit into a carry-on luggage. So all
no
the
way,
stuff.
Really?
Yeah, for clothes. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
Hey, you're winning. You're winning today on minimalism. Okay, maybe we should go ahead and get started. 9:04.
Awesome. Yes, let's do it. Let's get started. So let me quickly share my screen and just go really quickly recap kind of the overview, because there may be some people who are watching this for the first time. So let me share my screen and just go through how we're going to spend the next 6 weeks of the class. So this week, the first week is about coming up with good business ideas. Then we're going to take those business ideas and we're going to take at least one of them each and write a memo and write a really awesome memo, just the kind of memos that I assemble to get feedback on my own ideas and to raise money and to do all of these sorts of things. Then we'll design stuff in Figma. I'm going to teach everyone how to design stuff. This is how I got my start. And then we're going to build stuff. We're going to build an MVP. We're going to go through kind of like what the no code version of that might look like, what the code version of that might look like. We're all going to deploy, if we haven't already done so, our own websites to the internet with our own domains, which is going to be awesome. And then we're going to talk about sales. Obviously, if you want to build a business, which is the goal here, after you build a product, you need to sell that product. And then finally, we'll go through kind of everything else, which I've kind of used the word growth, but effectively growing your team via recruiting, via growing your company. Basically, I'm going to do a pretty intense deep dive. You'll basically see every single thing that we do at Gumroad around quarterly planning, recruiting. I'll go through our P&L, our accounting, our crowdfunding filing with the SEC. I'll go through Notion, how we use Notion, how we use Slack, how we use GitHub, like literally basically everything. And then obviously like the vast majority of the content is not here because the vast majority of the content is either going to be peer-based or it's going to be you asking me questions and figuring this thing out, because obviously there's like 70 words on here. And I thought what would be really fun is to actually use Procreate. So I don't know if people are familiar with Procreate. Who's familiar with Procreate? Procreate is an awesome app. Oh wow, that's like half or more. So I'm gonna share my screen again, but this time I'm gonna share my screen using AirPlay. Actually, no. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna share my screen using my iPad because that doesn't work, and then I'm gonna be knighted by Julie so that my iPad will show up as the main view.
I'm going to jump in and just say something quickly about
Please do.
anyone who was not here last Thursday. Just a quick overview of the course. I just posted the course Notion in the chat, and it'll also be in Slack. But just to get a sense of every week, the workshops are Monday 6 to 8 Pacific time for 6 weeks in a row. Then we have 3 peer mentor groups that happen. One on Tuesday at 11 a.m. PST, one on Thursday at 6 p.m. PST, and one on Friday at 6 p.m. PST. And I'll post all of that in the Slack. But we've sort of we're adding to the course Notion as we go. So I added an alumni mentor group page at the bottom that has a link to all of the calendars and a link to the mentor group Slack channels, and then office hours on Friday. Yes. And Sahil's going to post a Calendly link for the office hours every Wednesday. So you can look for that in Slack. So I'm trying to answer all of the questions that I got today and over the weekend about logistics, scheduling. You should have gotten 6 email invites for the workshop. And if you didn't, just send me a message in Slack and we'll work it out. But we're trying to post things in multiple locations. So you'll never be looking for the Zoom link or the time or anything that you need. But I'm on my computer a lot. So just send me a message in Slack.
Awesome. Yeah, we're going to try a bunch of stuff as we do every time. We're going to try a bunch of new things. And then a few things are going to really work, and then we'll double down on those things. And that is kind of definitely one of the themes of, I feel like, a lot of what I say over and over again. Try a bunch of stuff. Some things work, double down on those things, small bets, etc. But yeah, let's get started, and we'll see. This is kind of an experiment. I haven't like done anything like this before, but like this is how I think through my ideas. Like I like being able to do free form instead of just like type in this list of slides and text and all these sorts of things. And it also means that I have the chat open, so please use it. But Julie will help as well. Awesome. So yeah, let's get started. So this week, actually before this week, let me set the goal. The goal for the whole course, I think the right framing is kind of what we talked about on Thursday, but it's kind of this idea called anti-work, right? And I really like this. I like picking up on like what the zeitgeist is kind of already talking about, another theme that we'll get into in a second. But anti-work basically is, something like 100% of the time, your time doing what you want. That is kind of like the broad goal, right? That's, I think, what everyone wants. And hopefully we'll get there. The way that our approach to actually getting to this goal is by building a business, right? And so our approach to this is building a business. So that is kind of the 6 weeks or so that we're spending here. And obviously, if you want to be able to do this, you need a profitable business because it needs to exist for a long period of time. And there's only one way to do that, which is to be profitable. And yeah, so that's kind of the focus of the course. And this week is going to be on the first part of that, which is coming up with the idea itself. And there's 2 ways to come up with ideas. There's sort of 2 approaches. I mean, there's many approaches. We'll go through a gazillion of them today. But there's kind of 2, I think, real framings of this approach. The first approach to also, I want to flex my drawing abilities at some point. There's two approaches. What are the two approaches? Well, there is my approach, which I kind of consider like bottoms up. The bottoms up. And another way to say this, very commonly said, is solve your own problem, right? This is kind of the approach that we will generally be taking, but I want to give credit and talk a lot about the other way, the other sort of sets of approaches, because this is not like sort of my way is the right way. So the other approach is kind of the opposite, right? So instead of bottoms up, it's sort of like top down. Todd, I also flipped that. Top down. And another way to kind of, I think about this, because this is really, I think, the framing that sort of side uses is kind of opportunity or market first. And this kind of works nicely in like a framing way, because if you kind of, the bottom is obviously at the bottom, top is at the top, you kind of start with your own problem over here and you kind of finish with the market opportunity over here. This is kind of like, let's say right here is kind of like 0 to 1. 0 to 1, which is a great book. I highly recommend everyone read it. And then maybe here is kind of like TME or rework. And of course, there's kind of, most ideas fall, right? Something like that. So it's everything kind of is in the gray area. But just to be super kind of clear that like we're really, really focused on kind of this bottoms up approach. And why is that? There's a bunch of reasons. The core reason is that this is about the minimalist entrepreneur. And if the goal is 100% of your time, like notice that the goal is not to build a profitable business, right? The goal is 100% of your time doing whatever the hell you want. I think owning a business is a great way to do that. There are probably other approaches. Certainly if you go to the anti-work subreddit, there are many other approaches to getting to this place. But the goal is 100% of your time, which often means that you're going to start many, many businesses. I was just listening to a podcast or a YouTube video with Naval. I love finding like going like 8 set, like finding the oldest content possible from people that I like and respect, and kind of getting a sense of like, what did they think when they weren't as famous? And I learned that AngelList was 13 years into his career. He started AngelList when he was 36, and he had like dozens and dozens of ideas. I'm pretty similar. It's in the book, but like I had a bunch of ideas before Gumroad. Some of them even kind of worked. Most did not. And my guess is like everybody has these ideas, and we'll use Elon actually as an example in a second. And so you're going to have a lot of ideas.
Maybe this is a good time to ask people who has started a business before, or how many businesses have you started before? You can type into the chat, or you can unmute for a second.
I'm in the middle of founding my first startup.
Only one. Okay, you're in the first one. Okay, good. Oh, look, here we go. Started.
Okay, I'm going to ask a clarifying question as well, which is,
yes.
Like, what do people, when they hear that, this is like a meta question, what are they hearing? When you say started a business before, like, how do you define starting a business? Because that also might change, right? Like, is that I incorporated a C corporation in the state of Delaware? Or is it, I had an idea, I tried it, made a sale, maybe didn't, failed. If you want to chime in on what, even the people who have already answered, like, how are you thinking about, I'm very curious, like how even people frame in their heads what building a business, what a business even is. Sorry to get meta, but this is my show.
I'm thinking of almost anything as a business, from when I was a little kid and I used to clean houses for people or babysit, and I'd set up my little schedule and go out and try to get clients.
Awesome. Does anyone disagree? Did anyone, or not disagree, but like just in there kind of think about it, like, oh no, I have to really, like, for example, the person who said you're building your first startup.
Yeah.
Is that your first business endeavor ever? Or like, do you kind of weight startup more in your head and that's why it's your first one?
No, I've been a freelance illustrator for 20 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Amazing. Peter.
So this is my first business, not creative freelancer.
But when you're freelancing, were you self-employed?
Yes, of course.
So you were so you kind of had a business, or in
Yeah.
a sense, like sole proprietorship, but this is a startup. So when you say startup, what do you mean by startup more than freelance business? Obviously startup business, like how do you differentiate those two?
Right now, I had an idea. I wrote an MVP document, and I made a team, and we built the MVP basically. We are ready to launch in, I think, about 2 weeks.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Cool. And do you have certain expectations for kind of the startup in terms of growth? Or is it just like, we'll see what happens?
It's basically, the idea was something that I needed myself and that I could not find out there. So I decided to build it myself. So
Solve your own problem.
my only expectation for it is for actually to work and for other artists to start using it.
All right. That's good. That's good. Okay. Okay. So I see. I do think this does remind me of, or this does bring up something where a lot of people, the way that they define business is, or that they have started a business is when they have a co-founder, or in your case, like a team. I think a team really changes things. Like having one other person really kind of defines a business in many people, but I prefer sort of the first kind of the first person who spoke. Sorry, I have like a lot of things open. Because I really want to make sure that everyone feels like they can do this and that like they can start a business and that they should actually start many, 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 many things. And the way that I think of it is like jumping off a cliff. Like everyone says that all the time, like starting a business, like jumping off a cliff and building the airplane on the way down. Like what a terrible way to like get people excited about entrepreneurship. Like it's, I like to like lower the height of the cliff. Like let's like make it as simple as possible. So everyone should feel like they can start a business in this 6 weeks, like actually ideally much, much faster than that. I would argue, to Peter's point, freelance is like an amazing way to start. And we'll get into that later. Daniel Fasalo has like a really good way to think about it. But freelance, I think, teaches you so much about being a business owner because you are actually kind of a business owner. It's kind of it's kind of you sign up to be an entrepreneur without maybe realizing it even. Awesome. So why this approach? Well, one is, I mentioned, like this is about you. The way we maximize your chance of success is by taking many shots on goal. And inherently, like these sort of top-down approaches, like there's just not that many of them, right? The example that I often use is the iPhone. The iPhone is obviously one of these massive opportunities, though Apple also kind of discovered it kind of organically from kind of the iPod, et cetera. But the iPhone, let's draw an iPhone. They keep changing the design. So now this one has like a notch at the top and goes all the way to the bottom. So this is the iPhone. How many companies are kind of this top down? Like I'm going to say Apple, right? Apple. Like when I look at this, I think of an Apple iPhone, but there's like 10 or there's 6,000 businesses, I believe. Businesses that help make this iPhone a thing. Built this. And actually that I bet is just including like the actual things on the phone. It probably doesn't include, for example, like all the restaurants that served the people who worked at these companies. And so my point being that for every one of these top-down massive businesses, you have, the kind of things that Peter Thiel is interested in, right? The Facebooks of the world. There are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of these businesses that will all solve this problem for you. And so there are so many of these out there. Like I kind of believe that there may even be more than one per human, because the more problems you solve, the more problems there will become. Like I kind of believe there's like just an unlimited amount of these. And so that's like a really, really big reason for it. And of course, if you're someone like a Peter Thiel, or maybe even like me, I get to invest in a lot of startups. Like I like when people take big shots on goal, right? Because I don't mind if there's a bunch of zeros, as long as there's 100. But everybody else really wishes that there was an average, right? Except for the one person right at the top. And actually, even if you see kind of this, like using Apple as an example, or the iPhone as an example, this kind of power law happens even at this level, because you have Apple obviously up here. I don't know what they're worth, like a 2 trillion or something like that, 1 trillion, some stupid T. Then you have like TSMC, which is like, the manufacturing company in Taiwan that kind of makes all the semiconductor chips, which is kind of scary, but it is what it is. And that, I think they're worth like half roughly. And then who knows, maybe you can like put Instagram, like Instagram's probably worth like 500 billion or something. Like if you kind of include that on the thing, and like, blah, 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 right? So this thing plays out everywhere. You can't help it. And I just find that like, I'd much rather, I don't know, focus on the sort of bottoms up. Like, I don't need to think about building this sort of thing. All I need is a business that makes me 100 grand a year. And then I have all the time in the world to do whatever the hell I want. And so that's kind of why we take the approach. It's a multi-iteration game. It's a very long-term game, and we should kind of treat treat it like that. Julie, any questions that I should answer? Is anyone confused? Any questions? Feel free to chime in the chat or just unmute and ask. Does that make sense?
Any questions?
No
Not
questions.
yet.
No questions means
I'm
I'm doing a
very
perfect
curious.
job.
I'm excited to get to the I'm excited to get to the what businesses do you wish you started or wish you ran question.
Awesome. Okay, so let's do that in 1 sec. I want to give one other example, which is Elon Musk. And the reason I like to give him as an example is, one, I do actually think he does like a lot of the sort of minimalist entrepreneur things, even though people probably don't consider him one. But his trajectory as an entrepreneur, I believe, fits very nicely into this framework. And so, for example, his first company, I'm sure he had other companies before this. He had a company called Zip2, and people can look this up if they're not familiar. But he started a company, kind of a very software, like super simple, easy to start software business. I think it's basically sold like mapping software to like newspapers have maps on their websites or something, some newspaper website or something like that. So he started this company called Zip2 with his brother in Canada, I think. And then he started another company called X, which became PayPal. Had some like weird merger thing happen, and then became kind of a co-founder of PayPal. And then the famous story is that he made like $170 million off that. And then that kind of spun into SpaceX, Tesla, and Solar City, I think was the other one. But the cool thing here is like Zip2, if you kind of graph this out, like Zip2 was kind of like his thing. This kind of got him to Andy where he could kind of do whatever he wanted. That kind of created this PayPal X thing. And then obviously Tesla, like in SpaceX, and who knows what's going to happen. And so over time, you can kind of make bigger bets yourself, and you can kind of take the Peter Thielian 0 to 1, sort of thing. But turns out if you have unlimited time and capital and you've built trust and you have an audience, and these sort of being able to take these moonshot bets actually becomes easier and easier over time. So my thinking is actually maybe if I really want to like eat my cake and have it too, that like the best approach to the 0 to 1 mentality, to the top down opportunity first sort of approach is actually my approach anyway. So I get to eat my cake and have it too. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to say. And Julie, yeah, let's ask that. And I'm gonna write them down because I can do that when it's not Google Slides.
So my question is, what businesses sort of on the pathway to defining like what a minimalist business is? I'd love to hear what businesses people wish they had founded or wish that they ran.
Yeah, what are your favorite
domain names?
Oh.
What was it, domain names?
Also.
Just buying domain names in general.
Oh, interesting.
You wish that was your dream business?
I wish I had just learned about it way earlier.
So my challenge to you would be to find someone who did, so you can visualize like what that business actually, what that looks like.
Loom,
I can,
Calendly, go ahead.
yeah, I can add one. It's kind of shut down now, but the founder of Groupon started this company called Detour a few years back. I don't know if anybody used it. It was like a virtual walking tour app. Yeah, it was like my favorite app of all time. And then it got bought by Bose and shut down, which made me really sad. And there's no alternative that exists. It's like, it was a beautiful business and really great at storytelling and learning. And so, yeah.
Okay, so that's my follow-up question, which is why? Why these
Oh, wait,
businesses?
I
Like, what
want to say
attracts?
mine. I just wanted to give the people a chance to.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh, Wordle. That's my dream business. I wish that I had come
Wordle.
up with Wordle.
Wordle. That guy's he's a many, you know, if you go, he actually has a bunch of these too. Like Wordle was not his first game. He had two at least that I know of before. So yeah, common theme.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
so
there's
why?
something about like why the things that attract
Detour.
us that are
I'll write
important. Detour, Catan, Figma,
No one wrote Procreate, so sad.
Substack.
Okay, now I need to know why. So why, okay, Detour was answered, which was storytelling. What else was cool about it? Why would you?
It got people out of the house. It taught them something new at their own convenience.
Taught something new. Awesome. What else? Who said Figma? Why Figma?
I said Figma and I'm a designer. I think just before design tools were so expensive, you know, that prevented people from like buying Photoshop or Sketch, but Figma, it's like free for 2 people. So it just makes it so much more, design tools way more accessible. And the fact that it like allows for collaboration so multiple people can be in the file and is really good for the remote world. So it fosters like collaboration amongst like everyone in this remote world, and especially along designers, PMs, developers, execs to all be in the design file. Whereas before it wasn't really as possible to have that collaboration. Yeah, and also I think the fact that it's end to end. So as a designer, the process is way more streamlined versus like different parts of the design process, like going into a different tool, like for prototyping perhaps, or for doing a task flow.
I do love Figma, which we obviously will spend a week on it. Awesome. We could do this for a long time, but I'm talking too much, I think. So I'm going to move on. And I'm going to move on to all of the different ways that we can come up with ideas. And so obviously solve your own problem is not enough. This is like a good framing for what, I basically, what I want you to do is I'm going to come up with my own framework and different ways that I think about this. And I want people to look at these companies and figure out, okay, this is how, like basically start to visualize, okay, how can I come up with, for example, other companies that also teach something new, that also make something like Figma, I think is a phenomenal example of this, because I really believe that there is this sort of like thing that has happened in which you can take some like expensive piece of one-off software, move it to the cloud, give it to everybody for free, make it way more collaborative, more stakeholders. Like you can take that and probably apply it to many, many, many things. Like Splice is kind of doing this with music. There are a bunch of startups doing this with video. Canva kind of does this, but for like a different kind of thing. So like that, I often think about it like, let's say you had some sort of dimension and like Figma's over here and there's like 2 dimensions here, right? Like there's that, whatever you defined as like, okay, collaboration, like this is the collaboration line, right? But then this is like the vertical line, let's say. And so like Figma's here, right? Because it intersects like collaboration and like designers, right? I'm going to make a note to myself because I want to talk about something in a second. But designers, and then you could like imagine like, well, there's probably like this whole thing is businesses, right? So there's probably like every you can almost intersect this with so many different like lawyers. I think really lawyers really need something like this. Like it drives me insane how they work. Writing this book, I can tell you, man, like there's a lot of need for collaborative software. Yeah. Okay, so let me go through my frameworks. These are kind of like the ones that I think about. The one sort of most old school one is called economic utility, right? So this is kind of the thing that you learn in high school, probably. Shout out the 4 types of economic utility. If you took economics in high school or college, what are the 4 types of economic utility? What are the 4 types? Or type it in. There's at least one of them is written on the on this Procreate slide. Come on.
We'll look
Next
at
time,
that.
everyone's gonna have to drink a couple beers or something.
Yash, you got it.
I
Form,
can
time,
wake up my wife. She's a doctor in economics.
No, that's cheating. Form, time, place, possession. Form, utility. Okay, so Yash, can you unmute and explain one of them?
A while, but I think like the one that resonates most with me is time utility. So like ways to give people back their time, ways that like reward people along the curves of demand or supply in terms of giving that asset back to them. And that's kind of the trend for the other 4, but just in different places, or other 3.
Yeah, it's there. Yeah, there definitely there's kind of a lot of overlap. So you said, okay, so time, which yeah, basically save people time. You can't really give people time, but saving people time. Basically, another way of saying this is make it faster, right? Place. Who wants to do place? What does place mean? Place utility. What is the faster equivalent of this box?
So retail store.
Lakshmi, what'd you say?
Retail store. Any like shopping store.
But why? Why? Like what? You're correct. You're correct in that is an example of a business that provides place utility. But specifically, what is place utility? Like, what is the property of that store that you value? Is it the branding? Like why place?
Yeah, it's mostly a like central repository where I could get everything over there. Like I don't need to go for multiple places.
Yeah. Okay. So central. I'm going to put central repository here.
And
The way.
Matt's suggesting we give examples of some of these companies if we can. Is that what you mean?
Oh
Matt?
yes, yeah. Let's do examples. This is going to get crazy.
Yeah.
This is going to be an insane slide, but we'll do all of that. So yeah, let me do examples. But first, let's do these. So the word I'm gonna use is closer, effectively closer, right? Like central is kind of a way of saying that. Central, you're basically saying close to where other things are, but closer to you is kind of like, if you're looking at this and you're like, what drives me utility? Closer, right? Form is the hardest one, so I'm going to skip that, or I'll fill it in myself. And then possession. Who wants to do possession? Possession should be relatively easy.
iPhone.
It's on here. iPhone is an example of one. Okay, let me write that down. iPhone, retail store. Okay. AirPods. But yeah, so basically accessibility is the answer here. The reason it's the fact that you can possess it at all is what brings it utility, because there are many things that you literally cannot possess. Sid says remove middlemen. That is definitely, yes, this is homework for the book. Good catch. Yes, basically things that you were not previously even allowed to do, like you were, only half the population could do it, and now the whole population can do it, right? That is a huge amount of value. And the network effects fit into that and all these other sorts of things. And then form utility, I'll fill in myself, which is basically, it's kind of, but basically, I've never found the right, like, unfortunately, there isn't like a word for this, but basically more useful is kind of like what I say. And if you notice, I don't know if anyone saw my synthetic wombs tweet, which went more viral than I wished it did. This is what I said. I said, basically we should make having kids. And then what I said was faster, cheaper, simpler. This is where that comes from. It's like the framework that I use to create new ideas and come up with business ideas. And the biggest businesses do all of these, right? So like, I don't know what's the most valuable company in the world. Is it Amazon? Maybe. What does Amazon do, right? They save people time. They make things closer to them. They literally have these like distribution facilities that they've built. They don't really do form, though they kind of do now with Amazon Basics, right? Like they build their own products, they make their own products. And possession utility, right? And the possession actually is really clear with something like an Amazon Web Services, where they really do like allow me to possess, to like effectively own my own servers, and create a lot of value by doing that. And so this is like my framework. This is kind of what I use like 80% of the time. Like, and a really easy way to sort of come up with ideas is to say, what is really freaking expensive that shouldn't be? Like, it doesn't make sense. Everyone probably has examples in their life of like, why did that cost so much? It might be like some interfacing with the government. It might be, I don't know, some product. It might be some food. It might be whatever, but there's so many things. Really, like the most obvious one of this for me is if you do anything in crypto, gas fees. Obviously, gas fees are going to go down over time. Like, that is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. The amount of demand to get into crypto is massively regulated by how expensive it is to get in. So if you make crypto, by the way, like all the haters on crypto, you will get rid of all the haters. You will turn them all into lovers if you solve these problems. If you fix time, if you make it fast, I mean, this is like what people are trying to do. Make it fast, make it cheap, make it free, ideally. Change its form so that people can even understand what the hell is going on, and then give it to everybody, right? The accessibility, the possession utility is kind of built in from the start. And so I use this framework kind of all the time, right? It's like, this thing costs $50. I could use this piece of software that, they're doing it manually. I can automate it and I can charge $25. That's a business, right? And so you can constantly kind of do this, where similar kind of exercise I do is I kind of find a business that's over here and I'm like, can I move it this way, right? Can I move it this way in time? Can I make it faster? Can I make it cheaper? Can I move it over here? Sometimes something as simple as, hey, no one in this city has eaten this awesome food that I love, right? I'm going to open a restaurant. Like, that is place utility, right? And form utility.
How many of these criteria does a business need to meet for you to think about starting it?
Just one, to be honest. Just one is plenty. It's plenty, because most business ideas, honestly, I hear them and I'm like, you have not solved any of them. Like, it's surprising to me. I'll get pitched an idea and I'm like, you actually haven't really solved a problem. This is like and sometimes you're like, really, like every problem fits in this. Like, I got a lot of crap because at one time I tweeted, there's only 3 ways to make money. This is kind of another way to look at this framework. Only 3 ways to make money. What are the only 3 ways to make money? Someone said glue, which I assume is not the answer to this question. Kind of bundling, right, would be some glue, I guess. Okay, well, I already said one, which is save time. Save people time. Time. Save people money, number 2. And there's one left. And there's only one new word in it. Is anyone going to say, oh, someone got it, make. It's like Wordle. This is like Wordle. Money. Literally, like, and everyone's like, oh no, there's like other businesses that like don't do these 3 things. And I'm like, first of all, sure. There are a lot of bad businesses. But I guarantee you, if you go to like the S&P 500, or you go to your local store, you go to like 99.9% of the businesses you support, that you patronize, like go on, open your credit card statement. I guarantee you that like these businesses are doing these things. The other thing that maybe like isn't addressed here is they make you happy, right? Like, there's sort of a whole set of businesses that just like make you happy. I'm not focused on those businesses. I'm focused on like the thousands of businesses that are supplying to Apple sort of businesses, the things that are obviously in business because they save time or make money or save money. The reason is this is far more objective on the left, right? Happiness. It's like no one agrees on like the best artist, the best food, the best restaurant. These are all very, very soft, abstract things. These things over here, like if you can save someone $100, like that's a number. It's so much easier to build a business like this, and it makes your whole life easier. Like sales becomes a lot easier because you're like, I will save, my value prop is 7 minutes. How do you sell a restaurant? The food's amazing. It's like, what the, like, that's super hard. That's super hard. So anyway, yeah. Okay.
Sid, you want to unmute and ask your question quickly?
Yeah, I like the framework. I'm just curious. Rather than a binary solution, you're giving more time, you're giving more. How much? If you give it like a few minutes extra, that's not adequate. So how much marginal utility? Like when would it make sense to? There's some overhead in starting a business. So when does it make sense to say, okay, you're doing 10 times better, or like is there some ballpark to criteria?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And yeah, you're basically trying to figure out like, yeah, what's the activation energy, right? Like, when is it really worth it? Both in the sense of you maybe starting the business, but then two, like on the other side, like you can't really say, hey, this is like 1% better, right? Like that's a lot of work, a lot of risk to try a new product and, blah, blah, blah. So, there's a couple ways to think about it. One is like this obvious 10x better. I don't know if you've ever heard this framing before. But basically make something that's 10 times better. The reason being that people will only switch, like everyone has inertia on what they're doing, right? Like they already have solved their problem somehow, right? And the only way you get them to kind of like say, actually, I'm going to do something different, right? Is like when there's a big reason for that, right? It's like easier to say, hey, like I'm going to do this crazy trip, go to France, than like, hey, can you like, grab coffee with me tomorrow sort of thing, right? Like, and so 10x is kind of the simple heuristic. The reason it's 10x is because we have 10 fingers, right? Like literally totally arbitrary. So, but what I like about it is that it's just like, it has to be a lot. It has to be significant. And maybe that is something I do incorporate in this when I sort of use this framing is, I want to figure out what is the biggest differential there is, right? And so another question was basically like from last time was like, how do you, if you have a lot of ideas, like which one do you pick, right? And I kind of think about it like, well, what is the 10x? Like if I have an 8x and a 15x, like go for the 15x, like try to create as much value per person as possible. I think is going to vastly sort of increase the ability for your business to succeed. Like Paul Graham says, it's much better to have like 10 people love your product and like 50 people hate it, right? Than like 70 people like kind of think it's okay, it's fine, whatever, not a big deal, right? And so you really want to like over index on like those kinds of people. And that actually brings me to my second thing, which is I said sort of that, Figma was kind of for designers, right? I think what's really important to help answer that is you have to think about who is this going to be a 10x for, right? Because you build a product, for some people it's nothing, right? They don't care for it. And so starting with the right people, right? Like Y Combinator has that great thing, make something people want, it's pretty awesome. People want. And this is maybe kind of where I start to get more counterintuitive. Like they've really, I would say they really focused on the something. They kind of have like this very like builder engineer mentality to it. I really think you should focus on people. Like you should really, in the book, I call this start with community, but basically start with people, like start with who, and we'll do an exercise about who, but start with the who. And then I think it's a lot easier to come up with a lot of these other problems. The last exercise I want to do, there's two exercises I want to do. I want to do one more thing before I go into our last final thing that's going to be actually coming up with a bunch of business ideas, is I want to come up with trends. Like, I think one thing that's really important is you need to ride a wave. Like, I think it's very difficult. Like, part of selling is just hard. If you kind of want to search for market pull, which I just use riding a wave as kind of the metaphor. You can't surf in a lake. Like, you kind of have to go to where things are already happening. And so I just want to like really quickly like go through a bunch of trends. I would love if people just wrote a bunch down in the chat, and I'll write up a bunch of these. I'll start with a bunch of trends. Offline to online is something I often think a lot about. Again, these will all map back to economic utility. They should, either because going online saves time, or makes something closer, more convenient, or cheaper. But generally, like this is kind of like one level of abstraction lower, right? Desktop to cloud is a great one. Like that created a ton of opportunity. And ultimately, by the way, like the way you come up with business ideas is just like bashing, it's a bunch of like atoms coming together. So I just like will throw all these at you, and hopefully things will start to work. Solo player to multiplayer. single player to collaborative. Yeah, that's a good one. So that's kind of like that Figma one. Figma is also kind of this desktop to cloud and kind of offline online. If you for like wireframing, for example, single to collaborative is a good one.
I like gated to open also.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Domestic to global, user to self-service,
Gated
agency to freelancer creator. They're going so fast now. Hold on. Client and designer to collaborators, centralized to decentralized.
Code to no code counts. That counts.
Oh, manual to automated.
Manual to automate. Oh, I love this one. Honestly, if I could pick one and just say, just literally just zoom in on this one is probably what I would do. Like, I'm gonna star this. Agency to product is a good one too, actually. There's a lot. There's a lot. Like I would put like plant-based is another one, to be honest. Like meat to plant is definitely kind of a trend.
Seems like manual to automated also applies to agency to product and a lot others.
Yeah, definitely. Like in the book I say process to product, start with process, right? This is kind of that, right? Like all of it's basically, and this is often something I think about. Like when I think about, okay, how do I map economic utility applied to a business that already exists? It often is basically doing this, right? Which is taking a business that already exists and being like, wow, this is like so badly run, or like could be so much better done. And just making it better. And you don't have to like say, oh, we're going to take this coffee shop and make a freaking Starbucks, right? Or Cometeer or like something crazy like that. But you can say, hey, we're going to like use a bunch of software and we're going to make this awesome, right? Like I think, for example, a lot of the cloud kitchens businesses do this, right? Where they're like, oh, wow, like now everyone's just ordering on DoorDash. Like you can build probably a 10x better sort of like fried chicken restaurant if you're just focused on that specific kind of thing. You could use a packaging that keeps the wings crispy or whatever, right? Like you can really make that experience better. You can automate tons of stuff. You can kind of create these checklist manifestos, like all these franchise. Basically, you can like think like a franchise, even though you may only be operating one or two. And the way a franchise thinks is they basically take all of the rote repetitive behavior, type it up, codify it. And then the last step is kind of the full automation step, right? Which would be basically just like robots. Like you just, if you can digitize it, easy to automate. If you can't, eventually, Optimus subprime or something like that. Audience to community is definitely another trend. But like I would make a list of all these trends and like, you almost like think of like the way I think about a business is like it basically is an arrow and you want it to intersect as many possible things as possible. Right. So if it intersects like time utility and place utility and offline to online and manual to automated and collaborative, like you'll start to be, that's how you get to the 10x better, right? Like very few things are 10x better, obviously. Like things don't disappear and are just like so much better than what came before. They kind of, get 10% boost from this trend, 10% over here, 10% over here, 10%, and like Figma becomes 10 times better than Photoshop. Over all of these kind of like small compounding things.
So far that's three things. So looking at traditional economic utility as
yes. I have more. Yeah.
Oh, you have more. Okay, so let's just let's just because we had a couple.
I know we're like 50 minutes in. I'm like
no, we had a couple really great like framework questions in the first session. So I just want to like stop for a second before you.
Yeah, I'll do some more quickly.
Yeah, no, it's like, so traditional economic utility, is it 10x better than what exists? And can I ride a trend?
Yeah,
let me write them all down. What we have so far.
Yes, let me write them all down so it's nicely available. Okay. Start with people, like that's kind of like a really broad one, but just people in your life. Yeah, economic utility was another one. I would say like 10x better is kind of its own one because it's such an easy, simple framing of like what sucks. I often do this with like my bank account or Gumroad's P&L statement, which is I just look at literally what am I or the company paying for, and like what is the worst thing? Like what is the worst thing in December 2021 that we paid for? Oh wow, we spent $4,000 on Amex. Like what a shitty company, right? And like that's like since then, since I went through this exercise in like 2015, 2016, when I was like, wow, what are all the crappy things we pay for? And then now since then, Brax, Ramp, Stripe, Corporate Card, like boom, like all these like startups, right? So there's so many opportunities if you can just look at this kind of bank P&L sort of thing, like just literally go into your credit card, like what do you spend money on, like what's there. I also do this with like Google and Twitter, like what questions do people ask? Like if you go through your search history, one, you'll realize like how many times you use Google. I'm always shocked by like how many times I Google stuff. It's bonkers. But you'll see like all the stuff that you need help with all the time. And if you think about the save people time, like if you're doing content, like there are a few people who are doing content courses, books, things like that. A lot of that is this, right? Which is, it took 5 hours for me to figure this thing out. And I'm going to write a blog post that's going to get you that answer in 10 minutes, right? Or a YouTube video or something like that. Even when I had the idea for Gumroad, the reason I built Gumroad was because I wanted to sell this pencil icon that I spent 4 hours designing. And I felt like someone could learn it in 15 minutes if they had the pencil icon. So the pencil icon's utility was time utility, really. But then Gumroad's utility was like, form utility or possession utility, right? Like, so there's kind of layers to it, right? Every marketplace is going to have like multiple kind of layers, right? Another one I think about, this is a new one, is what, and then actually I'm going to use the trend because there was a trend which was the domestic to global. So I'm just going to say local to global because it's slightly more rhythmic. But this one is one I've started thinking a lot about recently, which is just like, what is literally, like, what does your region locally produce? And I've just been fascinated. I got a little bit into wine. I'm like, oh, wow, it's kind of crazy. Like you cannot compete because like your geography really matters on certain things. And I noticed that like every place has things. So I often think about that too. Like the internet is connecting everyone. So all of a sudden your customers are global, but you locally can, your region is the best place in the world that produces X, right? So for example, I live near Portland in Beaverton, Oregon. We have the best shoe company and we have the best chip company outside of TSMC. We have Intel and we have Nike. And so like think about like what is in your region. Obviously the common things that will come to mind are going to be the sort of food products, right? Generally. But like literally like think about what businesses have started. Like if you're in Seattle, like Whole Foods started in Seattle, right? For example, like why? Like what about that confluence of things? I like thinking about that kind of thing. These are all kind of filters just to help you sort of get more specific. You don't really need any of these, but these are kind of fun to sort of think about. Yeah, Volvo cars. What else? Another one is just this broad concept of being early. I really felt this when I tweeted about synthetic wombs because I thought it was kind of obvious that at some point we would have these things, 50, 100 years from now sort of thing. And it was not. And it just really made me realize like early is really important. Like, what are you early on? Like, what do you know is the future that you're like one of the first 5 million people on it, right? Obviously crypto kind of is probably something that comes up in people's heads. That's kind of too easy. So like skip that one. Like what, I remember I got my first Apple laptop was an iBook G4. I was early, I was one of the first iOS developers. Like, what are you early? What interest? And generally it's your interests, your natural curiosities. Like, what are you already kind of toying with on the weekends? Like, what are you reading about that, like start trying to pay more attention there. Like, what are you, if you imagine, like, I like to think of it like kind of a beachhead or something like that, right? Like you're here somewhere. And like, it looks like, oh, wow, I'm so late. Everyone in the world everyone already has this, but it's like, no, it's because you're only looking that way. Like you don't see all these people, right? Like, and a really one that I often think about is just startup equity. Startup equity, everyone knows what it is here. A bunch of people have some, you can angel invest, you can do whatever you want. You can own Republic, you own crypto probably. Almost nobody does. Like almost nobody does. And so like, that's pretty obvious to me that like, yeah, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, like everybody will, right? That's another one. This is another way of saying it. What will everyone do at some point in the future? What will be at 100%? For example, the internet. My guess is the internet will be at some point 100%. Everybody basically will have access to the internet. currently not true. Right?
I'm gonna get Lakshmi to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Julie. So I have two questions. So don't I need to choose a domain or idea which resonates with my existing background? Okay, I have an idea, but I don't have full background to work on it in future. Will that impact me down the line after I choose my idea?
It does, and we'll get into it. I think we'll do the checklist, Julie, if you can remind me to do that checklist. We'll do it after the who, what exercise. So yeah, I think it does matter, but honestly, I don't think it matters that much. The beauty of building a business, like if you imagine like using this graph, any business you start, you're going to be over here, right? And most people are going to be over here. And very few people, as I mentioned, want to be here. Like nobody really wants to be here. I noticed this because the bigger Gummer got, the easier it got to hire, which made no sense to me because I'm like, you're getting less equity, like it's less fun. But no, it turns out people want other people, like, you want to risk mitigate. And so basically my point being, it doesn't really matter because if you're the one who's willing to start and you make some progress, your business makes it like over here, still might die, but you've made some progress. You've removed some boulders out of the way. You've done a lot of the hard work. People will want to help you. Like they will start to join your journey because you already have this momentum and they're happy to help you kind of accelerate it until you're to the moon, right?
Got it.
So I wouldn't worry too much about it, honestly. It's certainly a nice, like if you want to use it as a filter, right? Like there's all of these ideas all over. And if you're willing to say like, I'm only going to focus on ideas that are in this box and you can ignore all this stuff, great, right? I think that's totally awesome because ultimately you only need one, right? You don't need 50 businesses, right? You only need one. So I do think sometimes it is nice, like, and sometimes I'll do that. Like one other exercise I like to do is the domain one, which I talk about in the book because Peter Askew does this, where he just like buys domains. And then he's like, what can I build with this? Right. Which I know is not what you meant when you said domain. You probably meant more of your experience domain, but like it's kind of fun to just come up with like a really intense filter and it will, the best book I've read on this subject is called Thinking Fast and Slow. But basically he says like the more specific, the more constrained, the more ideas you have, which is kind of weird because you think it's limiting, but it's actually freeing in a way. It's kind of like the 140 characters on Twitter, right? That sort of thing. So let me go through these real quick and then we'll start with the fun exercise. And we'll see if any of this works, right? Very important. So yeah, domain, I mentioned that. And then toe stubs is another one, which is I also talk about in the book, but basically this is the solve your own problem one. This is just about your observational ability. This is just about being able to see what's already happening in front of you. I guarantee you walk around your life and there are problems everywhere. They're constantly like, oh, I wish I could do this. The problem is I think there's just an expectation that it is the way it is for a reason. There's some reason it's like this. It was like this, some cost or regulatory or whatever. And that just like seems to happen all the time. And so you just have to start to like use this stuff, use economic utility as ways to kind of start to train your observational ability to start to see these opportunities. Like when I started painting, I started like just the world became more interesting to me because it's like, oh, that could be a painting, that could be a painting, that could be a painting. You start to train your eyeball. And so I would say that's the other thing, by the way, like don't wait for the perfect idea. Like give yourself 10 minutes and then go with the best idea of that 10-minute period and start building it because the act of building it will start to teach you, oh, that wasn't that good of an idea for this reason or that reason, right? And as we talked about on Thursday, ideas are not worthless. Ideas are very, 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 very valuable. So yeah, awesome. I think that is everything I really wanted to. Oh yeah, the other thing, another one is old versus new. This kind of goes with the trend one. Old versus new is basically old human need, old problem, new solution, new technology. Humans have always needed to eat, but there's better, awesome, cheaper, faster ways to eat today, right? Humans have always wanted things showing up to their door. There are better, faster, cheaper ways for that to happen. Humans kind of want the same stuff. We've kind of always wanted the same stuff. But But if you can find a new technology, you can literally go through all of the things humans have always wanted and be like, hey, this new technology makes that cheaper, makes that faster, I can now have that closer to me that I couldn't do before. So I often kind of use this old versus new as another kind of framing. And I think those are it. And I guess maybe my last point would be that most of this work is going to be wasted. Like, you are going to build stuff that will not work. You will have a lot of bad ideas. I think it's really important to measure yourself based on like how much effort you put into it, not your success, not your output necessarily. 99% of your work will be wasted. Just like 99% of everything I do is basically pointless. But the only way to get to that 1% is through that 99%, right? Like, that's the only way. So unfortunately, even if it is, is it a waste? Is it not? How do you even define that? I don't know. But yeah, anyway, do we want to give people like a break before we do the exercise, or do we
I think so. We have one question before, and maybe we'll take a 5-minute break or 3-minute break. Nikat, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi. So I just wanted to ask, how important is the domain name? I've only read a little bit of the beginning of The Minimalist Entrepreneur, and I know it really mentions that, but what are some creative workarounds if you don't have the domain name that you want?
Oh, that one.
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, I don't think it matters a lot. I think it can matter, and certainly certain kinds of businesses it matters more so. So I think for example, the example in the book, Peter, he bought VidaliaOnions.com, and he said that was awesome because one, it came with the business idea for free, like it's kind of obvious what you would build there. But then two, he could email someone, and if that email came from like Peter at VidaliaOnions.com, like they'd respond, right? Like immediately they would respond. And if you think about it, like a domain is like the first opportunity you have to kind of say something, right? Like it's text, it's kind of literally, if you cold email someone, like that's kind of the first thing that they're going to see. And if it is like food.com, like that's probably they're gonna be like, like that's interesting, right? Like, so I do think it does matter. I wouldn't let it stop you. Like my company's called gumroad.com. Didn't stop me. But I do think if you can spend like $1,000 or like depending on how you think about it, like I do think it can be worth it. But I don't think it's like the end of the world. And I always use examples like Google, Yahoo, Facebook. I mean, like those sound normal now to our brains, but like those are not normal. Like Google, Yahoo, like are you joking? Google is a $2 trillion company or something. Like that's insane to me. So I think successful mean, like everyone gets used to the name, right? After, so I don't think it supremely matters. But I do think it's worth thinking a lot about. I do have some, I know this is not part of this, but the way that I often think about domains, the way I come up with names, there's two. And then there's two words. So there's puns. I just try to come up with puns. So if I'm working on like, I don't know, like something to do with the future work or payments or this, right? Like for example, like Stripe is kind of a pun, right? It's the credit card Stripe, right? Two words, Gumroad, Facebook, Dropbox. The reason I like this, one, it works on the radio, which obviously doesn't really matter anymore, but like podcasts, like you can just say it to someone in person. It's easy to remember Gumroad.com, right? If I said it's like woo-wah, then they'd be like, oh, how do you spell woo-wah, right? So I like I like the fact that people just have to remember the linkage. But the best is puns. Like I love puns. I think if you can find a good pun, double meaning, triple meaning pun, like Vimeo is one of my favorites. Can someone tell me what is cool about Vimeo? The name Vimeo? Two things that you have to, let's see. Can anyone come up with one of those? Oh, there's three things. Oh, there's a new one. So me, it's like YouTube, but Vimeo. Me is better than you. So that's me. Another one said play on video, which is also true, right? So that's one, that's two. And there's one more, which is pretty awesome, which is it is an anagram of movie. How sick is that? Like, come on, that might be the best name of any company of all time. Amazing, right? Like once you realize that, like game over, that's your company name, right? Amazing. So well done, Vimeo. So anyway, yeah. So sorry, that was kind of a tangent. But domains, they don't matter too much, I would say. But they're a lot of fun, you know. And again, like if it gets you excited, like whatever gets you to start to make progress on your business, like if it's that, like for example, I bought antiwork.com. I have no idea what the hell I'm going to do with it. If anyone has business ideas, maybe we can try that here. But I just like the fact that I own antiwork.com. And like it might inspire me. Like I'm going to spend a lot of my time thinking about like what can I build on this thing, right? So sometimes it's like a nice hack to get me out of bed, metaphorically. Any other questions, Julie? I'm looking at the chat.
That's it.
Awesome.
I mean, I'm so excited. I would love to hear. Great. If people hang, we'll take it.
Yeah, but how about if I'm sure people do have trivia on this kind of stuff. So if people have trivia on anything I say, by the way, put in the chat because I love reading about this kind of stuff after the fact. People can read it in the moment.
Yeah. I want to take a 3-minute break, come back at 10:10 or whatever, 10, wherever you are.
Awesome. And just to give people a preview of what we're going to do this exercise that's from the book, Start with Community. And we're going to try to apply as many of these things that we just talked about. And then we're going to do breakouts and give everyone a chance to kind of like make those ideas better and stronger. And then maybe at the end, as a preview of the next time, we can like kind of workshop the ideas and see if we can like riff and make them better as a group and come up, see if we can, how many kind of really good ones that we can come up with, which is the true test, right? Like 2 hours in, are we actually able to do this? Like which is, by the way, one last point. Sorry, I talk a lot, I know. Actually, I forgot my point. So let's take a break and let's see if I remember in 3 minutes. That was the most professorial thing I think I've ever done.
Great. So we'll be back at 10:10.
Monoku is a good name. I do like that name. Like if you asked me to spell it, I'd get it right.
Well, now that I looked at everyone's email address, I want to know why there's Chris at Always August. I'm really curious.
Yeah, it's always cool, right?
August is. You know, I want to go through the email addresses and say why that domain.
Yeah, there's a bunch of fun.
Yeah, because now I know everyone's email address. So
it's like a bumper sticker, your email, you know, it's like your
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Will you ask your question again about the first email? Don't leave the meeting.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what was the first email address you ever had?
What was the first email address I ever had? It might have been Rackety Tam McBurl.
That's amazing.
It might. Oh, honestly, I was such a boring kid. I literally think my email was sahil_livingya@hotmail.com. Actually.
Hotmail.
Hotmail. Yeah, Hotmail. Yeah. Hotmail is a pun as well. Oh, could you let me in, by the way? I left.
You left? iPad. Oh, okay. Yes, I can let you in. What is single? Okay, single line. Okay, so Natalia, you answered my question. It's a single line haiku, extremely hard to make and extremely beautiful to read. I don't think I understand what that means.
Extremely hard to make and extremely beautiful. A single line haiku?
Well, do you know what a haiku is?
Yes.
It's a 13-line poem.
Yes. Well, in English, it's a 3-line poem.
Well,
I'm like, it's a 13-line poem.
Long time ago,
yeah,
someone in the United States decided to make a single line haiku, and that's called monoku.
Oh,
I mean, 13
oh.
syllables instead of
Oh, I see.
lines.
Oh, now I understand. Okay.
13 syllables
Mhm.
in one line. Is there any other constraint, like number of words as well, or no? Like 3 or?
It's funny how many of these things refer to children's programs, because like you were talking about the name I was using on Discord, which is Gem. And I'm totally dating myself. There was a cartoon when I was growing up with, yes, thank you, Alex. I appreciate it.
Neo 101, nice.
And that's why I always use the David Bowie emoji, because of that cartoon and it's a very horrible theme song, which I will not sing, but you can look up on your own time.
I love Roly Poly Ollie. Roly Poly Ollie. Good times.
Since I went through all the emails, tell me, is Chris from Always August here? What is Always August?
Hey, yeah, I just got back. Yeah, so I own and operate an agency called August. We couldn't get August.com. I live in Toronto where it's very cold and we always wish, that it was August. So at August, it is always August.
Oh, there you go.
And the alliteration is nice. Yeah.
Nice.
Over here, August is the hottest time of year, so it's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Toronto. July is hot, February is very cold, and August is like nice.
I'm born in August.
That's kind of like the what does your region locally produce thing. Like it kind of hints at something, like always
Totally.
August. You must be in a place that's, you want it to be August more often. Why may that be? Like Gumroad, even like why Gumroad? Like, well, I grew up in Singapore where gum is not allowed. So maybe that factored into the prominence of gum in my brain.
Oh, blank paged lab. That's interesting.
In Singapore, it is always August. It's literally,
Yeah, Singapore is always Singapore is always August for sure. Right now, I can tell you what the temperature is. It's 27 degrees Celsius up to maybe 32 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
No matter what time of day or what day of year.
Okay, you ready? We'll get started again.
Awesome. So let me share my screen and we can do this awesome exercise and we'll see how it goes. Oh yeah, one thing I wanted to say is this basically, I really believe this is, I know it sounds kind of weird because like execution is much harder than coming up with ideas to build stuff. Building stuff is certainly not easy, but I really think, especially in a format like this, where you're like forced to come up with ideas, like that's hard. Like if you're like, hey, design this app based on this idea, I can do it immediately. I can do all the other stuff. Like I feel like is much more deterministic, right? In the sense of like, I kind of know what I'm going to get out of an hour or two doing something. This is like kind of the hardest. So I really believe that like this is the hardest week of the lecture. It only gets easier from here, or of the course, in my view. So anyway, let's do this one. If you've read the book or you've kind of done that, you're familiar with this. But basically this is kind of like this is like the mental model that I use, which is kind of a combination of a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about. And it is start with community.
You mean to be sharing the screen?
Am I not sharing it?
Nope.
I think I am. I think you might have to highlight my iPad, or no, am I not? Oh no, maybe I'm not. Okay, 1 second. Sorry, everybody. I thought I was, but share content, screen, start broadcast. In 3, 2, 1. All right, there you go. Cool. If you want to see pictures of my cat, let me know. Okay, who is the first one? Pretty simple. Who are we solving for? Again, start with people, start with community. Then I say, basically, what do they do? Like, what are the kinds of things that they do? Kind of like activities. And then what problems do they have with those activities? Problems. And solution. And this is kind of a double, because there's the product solution and then there's like the business model solution, which are always the same. So let me just note that, and then we can kind of explore that. And often what I find is like, let's focus on product. Often overlaying the business kind of makes everything feel a lot more real in the context of coming up with business ideas instead of just ideas. Business. We'll do that at the very end. Awesome. So I'm going to start with some, and I would love to hear some other ones as well, but I already mentioned anti-work. So I'm going to put anti-work, and more specifically, the community I'm going to reference here is going to be the anti-work subreddit as a group of people. Another one I often like to think about is like fine art painters, because that's a lot of who I hang out with for fun. This is often like a list of people who you enjoy hanging out with, or that you have a hobby in common with, or something like that. You know, another one, kind of obvious one would be like remote founders or something like that, like who follows you on Twitter, like who are your people, etc. I would love to have a couple more of these. What, you have the Gum Twitter handle? We almost rebranded to Gum, by the way, Gumroad. Anyway, sorry, distracted. I would love more. Rock climbing. Rock climbing is a good one.
Writers.
What do you say, sorry?
Writers, people who write.
Writers. And aspiring digital nomads. We can start with this. This is a good list.
I'm going to say the opposite of aspiring digital nomads and say moms.
Moms. Well, I have the thing for you.
Oh, no.
It starts with synthetic and ends with wounds, etc. Just kidding. Awesome.
Medicine practitioners.
Plant medicine. Oh, no, I'm running out of space. Let me delete. Amazing thing you can do with digital.
One thing I love about plant medicine practitioners is how specific it is. Like,
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, one thing we've talked about that hasn't come up today is how very, very specific communities can be a great place to start.
Yeah, and I'm gonna push on that a little bit, right? Like Figma did not just start with like designers, you know? Like they started out with very specific like UI, UX, which is much more, you know, graphic design, for example, is like 90% of designers identify as graphic designers. Like that is the primary sort of design. And then probably illustration is probably second, which is kind of similar. Marketing, ads, etc. Like a lot of that. Actually, like UI, UX, product design is like not a massive industry in terms of number of people, but that's what they focused on. And so it's really important to be specific. And that's like one of those things that I like, you're right, I don't have a slide for, and we'll talk like, especially the memo chapter. So I'm just going to list some keywords here, and we can go through them maybe at the end as we start thinking about how to like make our ideas better and better, which is really about that next week. We'll get into that. But yeah, like for example, writers, like literally when you said writers, what I thought of was like people who write tweet storms. Why? Because it's a bit more specific, but it's also new. It's also kind of new, right? It's this new, and it's not like a new technology, but it's like this new format, community, medium, consumer behavior thing. Something's happening there. I don't know exactly what, but certainly there's like some weird dynamic happening there. And so I would kind of like, if I were you, I would probably say thread writers, right? As like a much, obviously you don't have to do this or agree with me or anything like that, but I find that, yeah, plant medicine practitioners would be much better than medicine practitioners, better than humans, right? Like all of these are a subset of humans, right? Not very useful to say humans. So getting, fine art painters is more specific than painters, right? I would say even like fine art might be too broad. You could say oil painters or something like that, or people who want to do portrait painting, right? Or some specific thing like that. So let's pick one of these. I'm going to just pick plant-based practitioners, even though I'm not super familiar with that one. So maybe that's a risk. Actually, yeah, let's not do that. Let's do one I'm familiar with first. And then we'll do one that I'm not familiar with if we have time. Yeah, so let's do fine art painters. And this is the way it's going to work is I'm going to draw another thing, and I'm just going to do this because we're going to need this whole thing per category. And then I'll hide and show the different layers if we want to do it, if we have time for another one. So awesome. What activities does a fine art painter do? Let's list some. If you're not familiar with what fine art painters do, I will start to list some in 1
Buy
minute.
paint.
Not a chance. They do what? Live
Buy paint. They buy paint.
Buy paints. Yes, they do buy paints. They do buy paints.
But then there's oil paint, acrylic paint, spray paint.
There's a lot of paints. So I'm going to say oil paints. Let's change this to oil. Make it easier. Boom. Oil paints only. We're not going to do anything else. What else do they do?
They clean up a lot.
Oh, the people are writing down. Clean up after painting. I have no idea what the hell you could do here to build a business, but that's awesome. That's totally fine because we're going to write everything down. If you want to write something down, you're like, that's not a good idea, I'm not going to write it down. Write it down anyway. Just write it down. Everything you think, try to get it out there. That's really important. This is like the vomit draft of business. Like you're putting all of your ideas out there. You can always delete stuff. You can always throw stuff away. But yeah, you want to start broadly. Sorry, figure out colors is another one. Figure out colors. This is actually a really good one. It's one I've thought a lot about. Research paints. I've also done this a lot.
Janet, what does underpainting mean?
Sell paintings.
The underpainting is the sketch that you do before you do oil painting to see what you're gonna
Thank you
come up with.
very much for the
Actually
for
called
helping me out.
Janet is the painter. The underpainting, yeah, that's
You guys will see that I'm the person.
That's like 102.
I'll ask all the questions that you think I don't want to ask that.
Oh, display their art in a gallery is a good one. Display their art.
Oh, paint related. I think social, like sort of Canva for painters.
Ooh, social. Oh, figure out what objects to paint.
One of the most important ones in oil painting is look at the classics.
Yes, do like master copies and studies.
Exactly. That's the way to learn oil painting.
Oh, Sid wrote deal with rejection.
Oh yeah, see, it gets more abstract. I'll tell you a quick story about the Pinterest logo. The Pinterest logo, which is a beautiful P, the way it was designed was the designers, two designers, got super baked and then just, I know, drew hundreds of P's. And their rule was they were never allowed to draw the same P twice. And guess what? After 100 P's, it gets really hard. But you keep doing it, And that's kind of the point here is you keep doing this and you keep doing this and you keep doing this. And like, for example, the deal with rejection, I don't think would have been your first or second or third or fourth, but there might be something there and it might cross section with other communities and other verticals and other this and that. But deal with rejection is certainly a problem. And then that kind of is like kind of the save people time thing almost. It's like, let me save you a bunch of time dealing with your, like, let me teach you this skill or let me help you get over this thing. Imposter syndrome, really, really real things. Awesome. So I think that's a good start. We can certainly add more and people can keep typing them in there. Oh, preserve the painting. I think that's a really actually interesting one as well. Wow, you're like so many business ideas. So I'm already coming. Transport the art, replace brushes. Oh yeah, I can show you some of my brushes. Oil painting restoration. Yeah, so I mean, at least to me, like before I was familiar with the fine art industry, I thought that they would paint. Like that was like my conception of what they did. But this is like dozens of things already. Like imagine like every single small community that like has this many things, like hundreds of things that and obviously you all know this because if you're in a specific hobby, you kind of know all those sorts of things. But I find that like, it's kind of like if you look at something far in the distance, like you look at some building far in the distance, you're like, oh, that's the building. Right. And then you get closer and then it's actually like, no, it has this like cool thing, whatever. And then you get really close and you're like, oh, actually there are all these windows and this and that. Like, right. Like I just think it's helpful to realize like, oh, wow, there's really a lot there. Awesome. And obviously like, there are many businesses at each one of these. these things. Okay, so what problems do they have? The second one, what problems do they have with those activities? Like what problems do they face? Again, like think about some of those frameworks like economic utility. What are the kinds of problems that they're having as they do these things? And you've kind of, some of you are clever, so you've embedded the problem within the activity, like clean up painting. Really, that's kind of cheating, in my opinion. Really, what you're saying is the activity is painting, maybe. And then what problem do they have is like cleanup, right?
I don't think Amy's here, but I think that there's something about the figuring out colors that intersects with Amy's thing last week about figuring out the nail colors based on a certain palette. Like if there's an old master painting that has a certain palette, pulling those colors out.
Yeah, there's one of the first apps I ever built, because I was trying to solve my own problems. I was a designer, is I built like a color palette manager on my phone to track out color palettes. And when I still to this day, and we'll do this in the Figma design thing, but like I still do this where like every time I have a new idea, I go to colorlovers.com and I just like scroll palettes and I find like the palette that like feels like the right palette for this brand or thing. So like it's actually kind of interesting like how often that's come up. There's like definitely something pretty interesting and compelling there. Like I could even pair some of these ideas together, like this sort of research paints, figure out colors, and buy. I could almost imagine all of these coming together, right? Like, oh, that's another framework I forgot about, which is bundling and unbundling, right? Like you either make money bundling or unbundling, right? Like you could potentially bundle these things together. And I could imagine, I'm getting so far ahead of myself. What am I doing? Sorry, everybody.
Well, I'm so curious.
This is what happens. This is what starts happening, you know?
Well, there are a couple of people who have said, I know that we're not supposed to skip to solution, but but there are a couple of people who have said scared to show work. And I'm really curious what people think the solution, the business solution is to scared to show work. Ben mentioned that. I think Peter mentioned that. I'd be really curious.
I think there's almost like a mentorship issue and almost like a psychologist, because all of this like people feel inferior to other artists and they are afraid to show their art because there's always someone out there that is better than them.
Yeah.
And I think the business model there would be coaching.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, there's so many opportunities. I mean, like, what does college do, right? Like, I think a huge function, this is, by the way, another trend is like institution to individual, I would say is another trend. And so like, imagine all the institutions, like take their market cap. That is the market cap of what will replace them, right? And so like take Art Center College of Design, or whatever it's called in LA, which charges like $60,000, $70,000 an art student per year, and say that's all moving to Gumroad, to YouTube, to Patreon, right? Like that's where our valuations come from, is we're taking bits and pieces of all these other things. And so, yeah, it's like, if we want to solve the problem that the university is solving, then we have to figure this out. We have to figure out like, okay, well, university isn't just about teaching you skills, obviously, right? It's about community, it's about networking, it's about all of these other things. So yeah, I think that's, yeah, pricing. Like, how do you learn how to price? If you go on YouTube, like this is like the top creators in all these verticals, this is kind of what they're doing. They're kind of making a list of all the activities and then they're teaching you how to deal with them. They're making a list of all the problems. They're like, this is how you build an audience. Like, we'll get into this a lot in the last week, and you can read chapter 6 in the book if you want a preview, but it's just constantly, it's kind of doing this, except it's not solving the problem by building a business to solve the problem. It's like creating content to solve the problem. Kind of, obviously they should use the business if they really want the problem solved, but you can kind of help them along the way, right?
So maybe we should give everyone a second to do this activity for their own.
Oh yeah.
Their own idea. And then we can come back and call on some people and just let the group,
I'm going to continue.
Like we're our own community. Yes, you finished, but then we can be our own.
Everyone should pick their own. Sorry, you go.
No, because it was interesting because the solution that people came up with for feeling nervous about presenting their work as community. So
I love Oliver's idea too, which is blind dating for our work.
Blind dating for our work.
There's something that's pretty, there's a lot of good stuff here. Awesome. I'm going to continue. I'll stop talking and you can watch, or you can do your pick your own community. Pick your own community. If you want to do something really hard, rock climbers, because honestly, I have no idea.
This really applies to my current startup actually. Can I pick this or
Yeah.
is that cheap?
No, you can pick it. No, there's no cheating here. The great thing in business, I learned this quote. There are no rules, only laws. So there's no such thing as cheating in business, for better or worse. You can break the law, but there's no cheating.
Sahil, I had a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. By the way, if anyone's listening to this and wants to focus, just mute. You want. So yeah.
I'm sorry, Sahil. So you had this idea of anti-work subreddit, and then you started working on the activities. I often kind of think about like self-evaluate myself, thinking that I may have a startup idea. So the activities I'm going to write down, they're very biased towards that idea that's already set in my head. So how do you do kind of a sense check to yourself saying that, no, I'm working on activities which normal human beings do and not tailored towards the startup idea I already have in my head?
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
I mean, to be honest, what I would say, just build what you have in your head. If it's capturing your attention, like just build it. And like, honestly, the reason I love memos, and we'll talk about this more. But I love memos because it sometimes gets the idea, like literally gets the idea out of my head onto something. And then I can like, work on it, and I work on it and work on it. And then that's sometimes what I need to stop thinking about the idea. So then I can go work on better ideas. But it wasn't good enough for a business, but in the idea form, it was so good and interesting to me that I couldn't stop thinking about it. And only once I wrote it down as a memo, I was like, oh, that's not actually that good of an idea, or that's not that interesting to me. But it's kind of like, when you like, I don't know, like the idea of something is more attractive than the thing itself, right? So I don't know if that's helpful, but sometimes I kind of will just, sometimes it's just good to listen. Like if that's what you're interested in, like, then that's what you're interested in. But like you can always set up like weird constraints for yourself. Like for example, like every single thing has to start with the letter C. Like you're only allowed to come up with businesses that start with the letter C. You do that 26 times, you'll have no constraints. You'll have every letter, but you will come up with a million more ideas, right? Because if you, for example, if I'm like, I don't know, name a bunch of colors, you might think of some obvious ones like red, green, blue, yellow, and then you just freeze and you stop thinking of any. You're just like, you named all the obvious ones, right? But if I say only name like cool colors that remind you of the ocean, then you're going to be like ultramarine blue, like aqua. Like these colors like aren't really even colors. They are colors because we have them. So we've run out of the obvious names, and we actually do have these colors out there. There is an ultramarine blue, etc. But like, you don't really know until you know, right? In a way. So I often find that like some of these constraints are they're kind of stupid on purpose, but then they work. So then are they stupid? I don't know. Like Twitter's 140 characters is kind of stupid because based on like the SMS text thing, right? It's kind of arbitrary. And now it's 280, which is like 2x the arbitrary. But it worked, right? Like it kind of ended up working. So sometimes like these kind of weird constraints, sometimes like technology, this is kind of like another way of thinking about the new technology pieces. Like what are the constraints of this new technology? Like maybe that opens up the door to something else. Right. Okay. Let me do some of these.
Thanks.
Finding is one that often I feel like some of these are saying that, which specifically is like locations. Community comes up a lot.
Finding a good instructor.
And Renetta mentioned startup costs for people learning to paint. I think that's it.
Startup costs. Yeah, it's just freaking expensive.
Yeah.
Especially if we are narrowing down to oil paints. Oh, turns out oil and dirt and the combination is expensive. and paint and clean up. Oil painting is the worst.
Waste disposal methods. That's interesting.
Oh, that's kind of clean up. I'm going to put that under cleanup, but that does.
Janet, you must paint.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, I do.
It's awesome.
Ventilation, especially if you oil paint.
Oh yeah.
It can get very unhealthy.
I'm going to broadly say like health. Like this is probably one, like you could probably take health and probably apply it to a bunch of other communities, right? Because like a lot of these communities have some health. Like for example, like if like my wife, she's into like she does 3D modeling. So she has like, you know, carpal tunnel syndrome sort of issues, right? RSA stuff.
Transporting it and shipping it and sending it.
Yeah, there's so much.
Transportation, sending, and shipping.
Like one exercise I didn't have time to mention was like basically take a product, like for example, a t-shirt, and just like try to trace it back to like, try to go back as far as you can. Like this shirt like came over here and then was over there and then went over here and then it was over here and it was made over there. And it's actually the combination of like this material from over there. And then this is actually from this plant over there. It's crazy. And every piece of clothing I believe is made by hand still. Like I think effectively all clothing, like sewing is still like manual basically, is what I heard. So basically like all of these, everything we're wearing right now is like made by humans. Like it's honestly insane. Like you wear a $10 shirt, you're like, this is great. This is amazing. Like both amazing and crazy and scary and all these other things. Very emotional to think about a t-shirt and its past. But I often think about that because at all of these steps, like, you know, you mentioned like for painting, it's like distribution, transportation, security, preservation. Like these are, you know, oil painting is actually good because it forces you to really, it makes that stuff front and center, but it's actually a problem with everything. Like every good has those kinds of constraints that kind of need to get solved and need to be made faster, cheaper, better, safer, etc. Pretty interesting. Distribution, obviously make a living is like they need to do, which is I guess kind of this one. This is kind of more startup cost, but yeah, same kind of thing.
Time, because oil paint needs to dry.
Yeah, they need to, let's say wait. They need to wait.
And you need to learn how to manage working on multiple paintings at the same time. So have one drying, work on one.
Oh yeah, like okay, I'm running out of space. Let me delete I'm gonna put like just productivity as one task. So that's another one that probably comes up a lot.
To cycle back to some trivia, a lot of painters in the past died from lead poisoning in oil paint, like Van Gogh, Goya, Gauguin. They all had suffered from lead poisoning.
Have you listened to this podcast called S-Town?
No.
Really good. It's like, I think Serial is like, you know, the mega famous like viral podcast, and this is like, I kind of think is like kind of number 2. But like lead poisoning comes up, I think, in that one, or mercury, or like some sort of aspect of that. But it's like, yeah, it's crazy. Like, I mean, lead, I've seen lead white, what is it called? Lead white is, I guess it's called lead white. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because now we use titanium, I guess, for most, like by default, I guess titanium is what we use. I guess there's other like zinc and stuff, but titanium is kind of probably the number 1. But yeah, this guy, I like was painting at this like workshop, and this guy like he was living out of his truck, and he's like, check this out, I'm making my own lead white paint. And it was literally like these like tubes that he was like making lead. And he's like, you can make lead paint, you're allowed to make it, but you can't, like in the US, I don't think you can even buy lead paint anymore, which is sad, because I guess if you want to make paintings like Van Gogh, you know, like back in, you know, those kinds of paintings, you really wanted to master copy them, you probably want lead paint. But it looked pretty cool. I love paint. I love looking at oil paints. John Singer Sargent is probably my favorite painter, though apparently I paint more like a Sororia for whatever that's worth. can't help it, you know, everyone has a style, everyone has a fingerprint. It's kind of inevitable. Awesome. Julie, should we get started again?
Sure.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's come up with actual solutions. Like, we have the problems, like the whole sort of, you know, point here is to actually come up with business ideas. So like, let's see how many of these we can actually come up with. Like, does this stuff actually work? We can come up with existing businesses that will probably be easier, but we can certainly come up with new ones. I know we came up with some already. Like, for example, this one, right? This bundled up buying of oil paints, figuring out colors, researching paints, like, to, you know, and even more, right? Because you have like learning and productivity and all these other things. Like, I really think like there is a huge opportunity for something there. Let me call it like the on-ramp to oil painting or something like that. Like, I can imagine a kit where you just order a kit and you get, you know, a set, right? Like, you get like a little canvas. Like, the amount of things you even need to oil paint is kind of crazy. You need canvas, you have your brushes, you have your paints, you might need some thinner. That might be all that you need to start. Maybe you probably need some paper towels. So maybe you like buy a kit, it comes with like white, literally yellow, red, and blue. And then you do that for a month. And then like month 2 comes, and maybe you get some, you know, you get some famous painting that everyone knows, like some Monet or some Van Gogh. And then you make this, and you learn about how to mix colors in this very limited palette. And then month 2 comes around, you get 3 paintings, and maybe you get, you know, a bunch more, you know, 3 canvases in the mail with 1 extra color. Now you have a warm blue. What? You can have warm blues? Crazy. And then you know, like, and then month 3, you have like now you have a warm red and a cool red, and boom, like, you know, 6 months in, you know, you've kind of learned how to paint, like, you know, the masters, right? At least you have all the tools now it's just like practice, right? To become amazing. So I definitely think there's a business idea there for sure.
We didn't talk about X for Y today, but Maya, do you want?
Oh yeah.
Do you want to, Maya? Do you want to unmute you and say your idea, please?
My camera doesn't work, but my sister is a painter, and I always go down to her workshop and literally do my graphic design and just watch her do her thing. And it's so productive, the time that I'm just like looking at an artist do something. So I would definitely pay for this service.
I love it. And we'll do a lot more X for Y's next week.
I keep thinking of Rent the Runway. That's a good one. Rent the runway for oil painters. So you could get the brushes, borrow the brushes, send them back, buy them if you want.
Yeah, Rent the Runway is a good one. Rent, how is it written normally? I don't know.
Something like that.
Someone said preserve. That one spoke to me quite a bit, because I make oil paintings, and I even want to buy some, to be honest. But I'm like, I don't want to actually own, like, I want to own them like in my name, but like I don't need them in my house specifically. So I would totally, you know, like there was like, I don't know if you saw like a Tenet, right? Like those art ports. Like the art ports, and this, art ports is a good one, because this goes perfectly to accessibility, like possession utility, like just not a thing that exists for normal people. Like I assume, like, I can't just like do this, right? Airbnb for oil paints. Yeah, like there's definitely like, how do you 10x better is often can just be cheaper, right? 10x more accessible to, 10x more people, right? To those people, it's a million times better because they couldn't before, now they can. And so, yeah, definitely a kind of like this like democratized art port. I think that's a massive a free port. That's a massive opportunity, especially with what's happening crypto NFTs. Like that's a big one. So let me add. I was like art port, free port, whatever it's called. By the way, another reason those businesses are doing so well is because they're parked in places that are like international tax, whatever laws, right? Save people money, right? That's another one. Art port, free port. Yes, digitally preserve. I guess NFTs kind of solve that problem in some degree for some people, for sure. Bob Ross, great business. Yeah. One thing I'll say about Twitch for oil painters as well is when you go specific, one, every painter is going to use your thing, right? Like if you're like, oh, we're for everybody, then you're for nobody, right? Unless you're Coke, like maybe you can say that in 100 years from now, you can be like, oh, we're for everybody, everyone believes you. But in the beginning, you have to be specific, you have to be the best and the best way to be the best is to be the only. And if you're like, we're literally the only streaming service for oil painters, and because services like Daily and Mux exist, you can actually build a kind of this old versus new. There's technology to make this kind of stuff easier to build. You could build actually in 2022 a verticalized streaming service like in 2018 you probably wouldn't even have been able to do without like a team of engineers and this and that, right? And so that is definitely one for sure that I think is good. And the other thing I want to say is you can actually build a much better product, right? Because if you're like, oh, I'm only for painters, like cool, then like what do painters need that all these other gamers don't need? Or even like gaming, like the reason Twitch is even a thing, right? Twitch is a vertical, right? They took gaming. The reason they took like Twitch is even a thing is because Justin's like, I don't want gaming. Gaming is stupid. I don't want gaming on my video streaming platform. So we're going to spin it out and do it. And like, turns out that thing is even bigger than the original thing, right? Crazy. So yeah, Twitch is actually a really good example, I think, of this kind of like, gamer like problem for a community. OpenSea, nice one, Julie. OpenSea is 100% this in many different ways. Like we talked about community, we talked about distribution, display art, social, and this is still early. Like I would argue like there's almost no social on OpenSea. There's a website called ArtStation, which is kind of like they basically took Instagram and we're like, we're going to build Instagram just for artists, but it's still pretty basic. I think you could do a lot more. So that's one for sure. What else? There's a lot of physical things, right? Like there's a lot of, like you could make better paints, better brushes, better easel. Like there's a company called Strata, which is mentioned in the book. The Strata easel, this guy had an easel, a friend of mine, it broke while he was camping or hiking. And he's like, I need to build a better easel because I literally like my painting trip's done. So he built a better easel. Now it's doing great, right? And so there's just so much. I mean, I even just look around my like desk and there's like these key lights that kind of die way too quickly, right? There's like, I don't know, there's stuff all over the place. So hopefully people start to feel like there's not a dearth of business ideas. You can have a lot of these and you can do it in a way that's like kind of deterministic. Like there's at least one business that I can build. I could spend 6 months working on here, and not that you should, like you may not be interested in oil painters as a group of people to solve for, but I am. So it works. Definitely, like I think a lot of this stuff around location is really interesting. Like there's a website called iOverlander, which is an app where you can find places to camp your RV. Like I used it when I went car camping. You can just basically, it's like community crowdsource is another huge. I should have written this one down here too. Crowdsourcing. If you like, one of the big things the internet does is it allows you to crowdsource instead of expert source. So there's a lot, Yelp. What is Yelp? Crowdsourcing. What is AngelList? Crowdsourcing. Like, so that's another one that I would kind of recommend. But like, so location, give me all the cool barns, like the dilapidated barns within 20 minute drive from me. Like I would pay $10 a month, $20 a month for that. Seriously. Yeah, exactly. So there's it's like unlimited amounts of, and the fun thing about this is like the solution, if you are struggling, is to just like do more cool stuff, right? Like start oil painting, start contributing to subreddits, like start rock climbing, start, like just start things. Adam from Tailwind UI, he said, if you don't have business ideas, start a business, any business, because if you start a business, you go through the process of starting a business, you're going to be like, that sucks. This sucks. I cannot believe I have to do that. I have to fax this. I had to fax something the other day. Like what? Every time I send a PDF, this is another one. This is another one I love to use. I just literally just call it PDF. That's my idea. PDF. Anytime I see a PDF, I'm like, there's a business there. PDFs are stupid. They don't need to exist anymore. They don't need to exist. Anytime, and by the way, there's a PDF as part of this course, which is a good example of something that doesn't need to exist. So anytime you have to like download a file, sign it, and then upload it again, like there's just so many things that could be made faster, cheaper, better, simpler, more accessible over and over and over again. Plein air painting by virtual stream. Again, like if you can do it, if you can do this at a high quality, I would pay. Like it doesn't exist right now. This is the other mind-boggling thing is you think this stuff would exist, but the reason it doesn't is because building business is not easy. It's hard. And so there's just like the bottleneck is not like, is really just the amount of people who want to start businesses. Like I even see this as investing in startups. I'm like, the bottleneck is people who want to start businesses it's like that seems to be where like the bottleneck is not like there's not enough investors. There's that like we do need more of those people too. But we really need people starting companies. So yeah. Awesome. We have 9 minutes left. Anything, Julie, that we should really cover? We didn't really cover the business aspect of these, which is basically pretty simple, which is, basically how do you charge money, right? So let me break that out into a new slide, and we'll do, again, this is like kind of a memo thing. It gets more into like the nuance, but I often find it again is kind of like a nice constraint on business idea generation. So I'm going to add this. But like basically how do you make money? How do you actually charge, right? So there's a few ways. One is products, right? You can have like digital products. You can have physical products. And one fun thing, by the way, as I write these down, like think of this, think of these ideas that we have come up with and been like, what is the marketplace take rate model for this? What is the digital product business here? What is the course? What is the SaaS? What is the events? Like apply the, and you'll come up with even more ideas, I think, doing it that way, right? So anyway, products generally, one-off sort of sales, right? So this would be like Adobe, right? Or a brush or something like that. Then there's services, right? Products and services, which, I would put in like courses, I would put like consulting, I put freelance. These are all like, I think freelance is an amazing one, to be honest, because you start freelancing, just kind of how I started my career, and then you automate. You're just like, what am I doing for every client over and over again? Automate, build a service, agency, build a product, sell the product, boom, right? Like that's Basecamp, that's MailChimp. Like that's literally what they did, right? Both mentioned in the book, I believe. So that definitely works. Or a restaurant, I would kind of put under this. Generally, I don't recommend restaurants because they have a high failure rate, but my guess is they're actually less high failure rate than you would think.
Don't start a restaurant. I'm gonna inject my personal experience as the child.
Do it.
As the child of a commercial baker. Don't start a restaurant.
Oh, you know the numbers.
I know the numbers. Don't start a restaurant.
Okay. No restaurants. There's not a Nick Cacone is from Millennium. It's like, oh, anyone can start a restaurant. It's easy.
No.
Everything turns to gold. I'm like, yeah, but you have Grant.
Sid has one question, and then I have a question about what people need to do this week in order to be ready for next Monday. Sid, will you ask your question?
Yeah, I'm just curious, how do you actually choose between multiple reasonably good ideas? Do you have some mental heuristics which guide you?
Yeah. Let's see. So let me say which there's a bunch of answers. So yeah, so heuristics is I like that framing actually, because I don't have to pick one. So which idea, what heuristics do I use? One heuristic I use, honestly, is like, what can I build the fastest? Like, what can I get to an MVP, to like selling in front of, to somebody? So fastest. By the way, I do this in my daily life. Like I do, my to-do list is ordered, not in terms of priority, in terms of how fast to how slow. And I just do the fastest thing. The reason is because I believe the faster I can do stuff, the more I do, like the more I feel like I just give myself permission to be more aggressive and stuff, I find. So anyway, sometimes the fastest. The other thing I said sort of previously was like the 10x thing, right? Like if you have one idea that's like 10x and one idea that's like, 3x or something, like I would generally try to pick the one that has like more impact per person, probably, because I think you'll have a much easier time getting the product market fit, getting, for example, if someone believes that your product has the chance to make it 10 times better, they're going to actually take time to help you make it. But if you're going to improve their life 10%, you can build the same kind of business if you just have to help more people, right? But like each person is going to care a lot less. And so you're not going to, it's kind of you never get to that scale, right? So I find that generally I would do that. I would probably, especially if you don't have sort of a business that's working exactly and you're still kind of on your first one, I would say B2B over B2C. So for folks who don't know, basically this is kind of, this is like kind of going back to the iPhone. This is the iPhone. And this is like all the 10,000 other businesses, right? Like if you think about it, like basically all these businesses are kind of, selling to Apple, and then Apple is the one selling to us. This is not exactly perfect, right? But like there are many, many more B2B businesses. You just don't see them because you see the iPhone, right? So I think that's, if you have a bunch of B2C, B2B, generally B2B is a little bit easier. Like it's if you're like, hey, Gumroad spends $600 on this, I could, you'll have to spend $60 on this. Really much easier sell. So that's one thing I would say. And then what else? Also, yeah, just what's interesting, like I would just follow your interest. What's more fun? I think that's another one that's important. Maybe there's someone you really want to work with and they may be more interested in one or the other. So there's a bunch of different ways to kind of think about it.
I'm reminding you about the checklist.
Yes. And then finally, we have a checklist. Wait, let me write this one down. Who do you want to? Because I do find sometimes I'll like, I don't know if I'm like, I'll ping someone I really like and just try to riff with them on like what they want to work on. Just kind of a fun thing to do. By the way, that's a good exercise for next week as well, is to just like find somebody and just like help them come up with it. Like, sometimes it's like, I don't know if any designers here, but like, have you ever tried designing your own personal website? It's like the most brutal experience on earth. But then you like, a client asks and you're like, here's 50 different website designs for you. It's like too close to home, right? So sometimes like you can't help, like you can't do this exercise for your own business. It's like too high stakes. But if you like help someone else, it's like super easy, like this exercise probably would have been harder, honestly, if I was just doing it myself. But like I'm like not paying attention to that part of my brain right now, in a way. The worst.com is good domain. But yeah, so yeah. And yeah, let's do the checklist. Let's do the checklist. So do we have it? Julie, do we have it?
Yes, I mean, I have it.
I feel like I probably have it memorized. So this is the ultimate checklist, which is once you have your ideas, you're going to realize they all suck. And you're going to do it again. No, just kidding. But what is the checklist? First one, which is, will they pay for it, right? Is that one of them?
Yes, that is it is one of them. Is there
what is that specifically? Let me write down what it actually is,
because this part's important. Phrased it. Is there a clear path to profitability by selling the product and service to customers? Also known as, will someone pay for it?
Yeah, I'm going to say path to profitability. And I would just say soon. This is kind of the minimalist thing, like once you get to profitability, you can take as many shots on goal as you want, right? So I would say soon is kind of key here. But yeah, path to profitability, right? Unit economics, like, are people willing to pay? This is kind of like a way to do the B2B to B2C thing. Another thing is consumers are just less likely to pay often. Businesses are much more likely to pay and have much more money. A different way to, would be to say like rich people over poor people, right? Obviously not in any real way, but in terms of ability to pay for a product or service, like you may want to target some kinds of people over other kinds of people, right? For example, like the iPhone first came out, it was like stupidly expensive. No one could buy it. It's actually weirdly more expensive now, but everyone has one. I don't know exactly what happened there. I think phones just got so much more powerful that like they just, sort of deflationary technology. But yeah, I think, anyway. Path to profitability, right? Will people pay for it? Another one, and this is something that I use often, which is, will it grow organically? Basically, will it grow by people using the product inherently? Why is this so important? This is the one that will probably, like a lot of the ideas, like, oh, this doesn't meet anymore. Again, it doesn't have to be, but I often use this. So will it grow organically. And the reason it's so important is because if it does grow organically when people use it, then you can focus on getting people to use the product, and then them using the product is going to get more people to use the product, right? So example, Gumroad. Gumroad, to use Gumroad, you have to tell your audience about it, which means that for every single person we sign up to Gumroad, they are inherently going to sign up more people to Gumroad, which creates this like nice snowball or kind of like compounding thing, right? Where we just have to focus on this part, just getting people from 0 to 1, getting people from 0 to 1, and then they do the rest, right? But imagine if they didn't. Imagine if there was no organic growth. Then like you have a sales team, you have all, you know, it's like you're constantly trying to make this thing move. Again, there are many great businesses that do not do this, but I find for myself personally, it's important for me to find an angle. And this is just often a fun exercise. You know, you can take your business idea and say, how can I make it grow organically, right? Like Instagram, before they launched, had these beautiful filters, and like they were so opinionated about them that people would share them, and like it became a brand even without Instagram having an app. Like, so there's sort of clever ways to kind of do that. Okay, this is kind of I know we're going a little over, sorry. I swore we'd have enough time for everything, but we never will, it turns out. This one is basically what was mentioned earlier, which was basically like, what skills do I need? Like, or do I need, like, I think Lakshmi asked, right? Like, is that a requirement? It's not, but I do think, you know, you should have the right skill sets to at least build the MVP, right? So basically, can I build it? Maybe I being the dominant or the most important thing here. Like, I just like building stuff myself. I like learning. I don't like, you know, one reason that I picked building a business as the way to get free and anti-work is because there are no gatekeepers. You're selling to a market. You don't have to ask some university for permission, or, you know, like some association for a specific document. What I love about entrepreneurship is you can just build a product and sell it, and you don't have, there's no regulatory body you have to really appease or anything like that. So similarly here, like I like to find things that I can build myself. Obviously I like building stuff with other people too, but I want to be in control, because then it's in, you know, my destiny sort of thing. And then the most important thing is, will I love it? And this is not it like today, but this, you know, this is kind of like, will you marry me sort of thing, right? Like, but like 10 years from now, by the way, I've been working on Gumroad for 11 years. So I can say this, there are parts I don't love, to be honest. But there are parts I do love. And so that's important, because ultimately, if all these things do work out, then you're stuck with your business, which, you know, I have friends who are running businesses that they hate, like genuinely hate. So, you know, important to keep in mind. So anyway, I think we're out of time. I know we went a little bit over. I think we did a pretty good job though. I think this format kind of works, but I would love everybody's feedback on it. So we can and starting next week, we're going to do a lot more, especially because people will have stuff. A lot more of the second half will be on like Q&A, like actually working on your problems together.
So what should people do this week to be ready for next week?
Yes. So you should probably, I would say, read, let's say, the first 3 chapters of The Minimalist Entrepreneur, or I would probably just listen to the audiobook. By the way, if anyone in this class hasn't bought it, I'll put a PDF in Slack for free. So anyone can have it for free and browse it really quickly as well. Don't tell Penguin. And what else? And then come up with, do the exercise, like pick one community, pick 2, like come up with as many business ideas as possible, like 15, 20, 25. I would say 25 is probably a good number. You only need 1, but I do think it's helpful to kind of, you know, kind of get the bad ideas out of the way, you know, in a way. And then what else? I would say that's a pretty good start. If you want to start, if you're pretty convinced, you're like, this is my best idea. You want to strengthen your ideas. You want to have varieties of your ideas. Like just, oh, sorry, I'll unshare my screen. How do I do that? Zoom, unshare.
I think another place is the playbook. I posted a link in the chat to the playbook. It's also on the course Notion. The whole first section of it is really about generating business ideas in addition to the framework Sahil showed about who, what do they do, what are their problems and how to
We're
solve
covering a
them.
lot more in this cohort than yeah, this is like 2 to 3 weeks worth of content. I mean, let me show you, and yeah, people drop this to record anyway, right? So let me show you an example of, a reach goal. Like if you do all the ideas and everything like that, and you still have time, would be to write a memo. Kind of just basically we'll do this next time, but like if you want to kind of get a head start and like have some sort of something to start with, I'm gonna link. I just linked something in here so people can see it. I won't share it because I don't want to ruin it for any spoiler alert for anybody for next time. It's not that it's a secret, but I'll share it in the chat so people can see it live. But this is a memo that I wrote for a product that we're working on internally at Gumroad. This is literally, it's funny because I wrote the first version of this like in 2017 or 2018, before Deal, before remote.com, before COVID and all of these other things. So this is, you can kind of take this and maybe make a version of this much shorter, much smaller for one of your business ideas, your best one probably. But this is a lot of what we'll do next time, is like we'll kind of go through like kind of how I often use this framing of problem, solution, market. I use different ways of doing it sometimes. Like I use GTM, MVP, whatever. So we'll go through a bunch of those. So that's kind of a preview of the kind of the next step of and I think if you, I don't know how public it is. Let me make the flex style thing public too. It is public. So you should be able to, if you click through, you'll see other stuff there too. So you can get a preview of more stuff if you want, but that should be a good start. I think that's plenty. Coming up with a bunch of business ideas and seeing if you can turn one of them into a memo, I think, and read a couple chapters. It's a pretty good amount of stuff. And then I'll try to do a better job of like, as I see things, I'll post them in the Slack. So they'll be kind of like ad hoc, kind of things that if I see things that are topical as I waste time on the internet, as we all do. Awesome.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. I'm going to go have a glass of wine. So hopefully some people will join me. Unless you're in India or something, then don't do that. All right. See y'all.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.